Hi, everyone. This is Karen Roy, and we are back with another episode of Life Possible. If you are enjoying the content, please go to your podcast platform or to YouTube, wherever you're seeing this, and share, add a review, 5-star, preferably, if you like it. So, with that out of the way, I would like to introduce my guest. This is Travis Davis, and we first started following each other, well, to my awareness, on LinkedIn pretty regularly, and liking each other's content and that kind of thing. And then I had the privilege of meeting him at the Scottsdale Abilities Expo, which was great. We got to spend some time together in front of the New Motion booth, and then plan to. I knew that Traps did a podcast, and he knew I did a podcast, and so we were like, you know what, this is the perfect opportunity to collaborate. So, without further ado, I'd like Travis to explain a little bit about his disability and kind of his journey so far. So, Travis, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Karen, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So, I was born with a disability called cerebral palsy, and it is a birth defect. So, right around, I have an interesting story. So, right when I was born, the doctor had noticed that I wasn't getting oxygen into my brain, and that had caused some brain damage. And so they did some tests and they realized that I had cerebral palsy. And so, because of that, and so there's the type of cerebral palsy that I have is called spastic diplegia, which means that my legs are affected. And so, cerebral palsy can affect somebody's upper body, lower body, left limb, right side, left side, any combination of both, or just like one. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was just the my legs, and
Right.
so because of that, I grew up using a walker. I've gotten through multiple surgeries. I think like 13. Then after using my walker for some time, I graduated to forearm crutches, which I still use today, and doctor visits and this and that. And that was in addition to the doctors finding out that I had a hole in my heart. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, I was in the um, intensive care unit for about 6 months just because of all the surgeries that they had to do when I was a baby. So it was, you know, the doctors realizing that I had a hole in my heart, cerebral palsy, and then I also had hydrocephalus because there was an excess of brain fluid. And so they needed to insert a tube, which is a catheter, to make sure that there was enough brain fluid that was regulating from my head to my stomach. So
How old were you in that when
that
they
was
found
all
that
when I was born.
out? Okay.
Yeah. So it was just like
Is
all these
that
things
a
at once.
common issue with cerebral palsy? Is having the hydrocephalus or is that fairly uncommon?
So I have a number of friends who have like spina bifida and other
Yeah.
types of disabilities that have hydrocephalus.
Right.
I do think that for whatever reason, there is probably some correlation between having cerebral palsy because it is a neurological
Hmm.
disability and because of hydrocephalus is in the head. So I would, if I had to guess, I would
Yeah,
say yes.
I guess the reason I asked is because it is pretty common with
Hmm.
spina bifida, but I had not heard that with very many people with CP. So, and then my other question is because I think that I guess it could cause um, cognitive deficits, CP, but very often um, it does not. Like you said, it affects your limbs, your ability to ambulate, walk, maybe even your upper body. Like for some people, I know they have very much increased spasticity, which
Hmm.
can be very debilitating. But there are times when people who maybe have body wise lots of impairments, but very little, if any, cognitive impairment. So do you know any statistics on that, or what's your anecdotal experience?
Um, I don't know any statistics right off the top of my head, but I just know with me, I didn't have any types of deficits with learning. I was never in special education growing up. I went to private school for elementary through high school, actually, and between elementary and middle school, I was the only person in the school with any type of physical disability. And then I
Mhm.
went to high school, and there was another student there that had an acquired disability, and she was using a wheelchair. But for me, I've been able to be in the classroom and learn just like everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's often the case. Even when people have difficulty with speech, and then there's some assumption that there's a cognitive deficit, but that is not a good assumption to make, because very
Exactly.
often there is none. Um, so tell us a little bit about your career journey, and then what led you to the TEDx stage.
hmm Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I got my bachelor's from a college out in Southern California in English, and then I moved back home to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm from. And at the time, after I got my degree, I had no intention of becoming a teacher, even though a lot of people were asking me if that's like the direction I was going to, because for whatever reason, English and teaching seem to go hand in hand. But it's like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to do any of that. But a friend of mine was telling me that the school that I had graduated from was looking for substitute teachers. So I just decided to do it just because I was curious and to see what that experience would be like. So I started substitute teaching, and what started out as maybe like a few weeks turned into months, turned into years, and it was just a real wonderful experience that I just had no idea it would turn into. And so what I noticed as I was at the school for an extended period of time was that the students were very curious about my wheelchair or about my crutches. And because it was a private school, there wasn't anybody else at the school that looked like me. So I
Yeah.
don't think that the students had any sort of frame of reference about another person with any type of disability. So when I came to the school, they were like, wow, I want to ask questions, but then I don't, but then I do. So it's like this back and forth thing. And I got to the point where I just wanted to share my experience first with the middle school students, because I feel like they are the most curious. So,
Mhm.
I was talking with them one morning about my disability and asking if anybody there was afraid to ask me questions, but were curious, and everybody, raised their hand because that's just how they felt. So I shared with them about my disability, and they were really appreciative that I did that. Now, after I finished with my time subbing, I started my master's program at the University of New Mexico in adapted physical education. And I had just finished a presentation on social inclusion in sports, and how sports is really used as like the language between people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and how the
Yeah.
inclusion can happen, especially in sports like wheelchair basketball, where pretty much anybody can play in it. You don't
Mhm.
have to have a disability to do that. And so I did see a call for submissions for a local TEDx um, event here. And so I had given it some thought, and I was thinking, well, maybe instead of social inclusion in sports, I could do social inclusion in education and
Mhm.
kind of base it off my experience in the classroom. So I put together a proposal and didn't really think anything of it. But about 2 months later, I was in my legal rights for individuals with disabilities class, and I got an email near the end of class, and yeah, it was just kind of history from there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to give the talk that I gave without my wonderful speaking coach, Angie Alley, who really was instrumental in me having the talk that I did.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's interesting. Because I've never used like a speech coach before, but like I know I've heard of other people or the recommendation of, gosh, what is the club that people join?
Toys,
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters.
Yeah, joining Toastmasters to increase your experience, your comfort level, and then get feedback on what makes a good speech. But it was an amazing TEDx. I loved it. It was really, really good. And it was that stage intimidating. It looks intimidating.
I think, yes, to answer your question, yes, it was intimidating, but I think that it was a little heightened because of my disability. Sometimes when I get anxious or nervous, my muscles tend to tense up, at least with my legs. And so
Hmm.
um, that was a little nerve wracking because I'm
Well,
like,
you didn't look nervous or
well, I
sound,
appreciate that.
yeah, or sound nervous actually at all. Um, but it was amazing. And I right before we started hit record, I was thinking about how um, children are born curious. Children in stores with my disability and probably with yours, if you're in line at the grocery store, first of all, even toddlers, before they even have like really great speech skills, they like see me. This happened like over the weekend. They see the wheelchair and they literally are like, I catch, they want to know about this, and you can see it in their face. And then when they can speak, they're saying to their parents, like, "Mommy, why is she in a wheelchair?
Mhm.
Why is she in that?" You know, and and I love answering those questions for them and um, making them feel comfortable asking them, and then answering them and putting the parents at ease, really, that they're embarrassed, right? But that they shouldn't be. Like, it's completely fine. This isn't taboo to ask someone, especially in the appropriate way, like about your disability. But because parents have that reaction, and there we have social norms that are, um, that the parents kind of squelch that curiosity out of them. And so I guess by the time they get to, it's interesting to me, by the time they get to junior high, like all of these kids that raised their hand wanted to know and wanted to ask and didn't,
Mm.
because it had been socialized out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what I had recognized when I was subbing for so long. And yeah, I can I probably can't even count how many times on my finger that sometimes I go out to Target or Walmart in my wheelchair, and I get those comments even when I'm using my crutches. And so it used to
Hmm.
bother me long, long, long time ago, but I just feel like it's part of who I am, and I can't really get away from it. So, why
Right.
not try to figure out a way to embrace it or just deal with it in the most respectable manner. Use it as an educational moment.
Yeah. And that's what, yeah. So there have very few times has the question been phrased to me where it was offensive to me, but there have been a couple times, and over the, because for me, I've had my spinal cord injury for 34 years, where it's phrased me like, "What are you doing in that? Like, are you just in a way that they, it was a bit accusatory, as if I just sitting in it, I don't really need it, kind of thing."
Mm,
Now that can be a compliment, right? Because I work my butt off doing the functional electrical stem and trying to keep some muscle tone in my legs, um, and trying to stand as much as I can with my standing robotic device and prevent contractures and all that. So my legs don't look like I've been paralyzed for 34 years. And so there's a way to phrase that. Say like, you look great. And it doesn't, you don't, there's no atrophy, or there's, whatever the case may be, that's a compliment. But there are times when people almost like accuse me. It's, what are you doing in that? Like,
mm-hmm.
are you just faking it? As a matter of fact, there were some comments on, I did some how-to videos on transfers, getting in and out of the car. I did in and out of the bed, and they were completely instructional. One of them went, well, two of them sort of went viral for all the wrong reasons.
Mm.
For uh, people that are interested in disability, not for the purpose of education. Let's just put it that way. But there were recent comments. One of them is kind of getting a resurgence of comments right now. And there was a thread where people were like, I saw her move her legs. Where are your hand controls? The hand controls in that car are on the right side, not on the left. And they're like, why don't you have hand controls? Like with a little like inquisitive emoji, like you don't really, like you must not really need them. And they're like, yeah, I saw that too. And it was kind of this thread of, and I thought, and so for a minute I was like, wait, I've been paralyzed for 30. I would love it if I could wiggle a
Sure.
toe, right? What I feel like they were doing was basically saying, "Oh, she can walk." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. This is a big 34-year farce that I hang out in a wheelchair and pretend to be paralyzed for attention." It as you can tell, it struck a chord with me. I chose not to respond. I did at first. I said, "What are you saying? You think I don't need hand controls?" And then I was like, "Wait, I'm getting sucked into something really stupid, so I'm not gonna." And I actually just blocked them all or banned them. Actually, I
Oh,
banned them.
good.
I love that word. You have been banished. You've been banished from my Facebook. Um, but for the most part, I do think it's an opportunity for education, for educating people, and that I don't think that they mean to be offensive. But as you mentioned, you might be the only person in their world that they know that has a disability.
Yeah.
Um, so, so being offended by all of the questions and answering in a defensive way is probably not helpful for promoting what we're trying to promote, which is inclusion, right?
Hmm.
If you want to be included, you should be nice.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have any of those experiences where people asked it in a more of a derogatory or accusatory tone?
Well, so my situation is a little different because I didn't grow up using a wheelchair. I started
Yeah.
using it when I was in eighth grade because my last surgery, was a little difficult for me. And I started using it. It was around the time that I started playing wheelchair basketball. So I
Mm-hmm.
had a friend of mine who was getting a new basketball chair and said that I could have her old wheelchair. And so I just started using that around school after after I got rid of my cast on my legs from the surgery. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just became a thing where it was easier just for me to use it around school, around campus, along long distances. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sometimes it's a little odd using the chair and then standing up, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get. I mean, I freak people out sometimes where I just like stand up if they're behind like a desk or something and
All right.
they're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know you could stand up." But I don't
Do
really
you
think
have
about it anymore.
braces?
I
On,
do have leg
yeah.
braces as
Okay.
well. So,
Yeah.
I don't really think about it anymore. If I don't feel self-conscious. I know people, or I know of people who don't want to use the wheelchair even though it probably is in their best interest, but I
Oh
mean
yeah.
they're very stubborn,
Yeah.
which is not a judgment on them. That's just
Well, I mean, it took a long time for me to get really comfortable. I mean, years. Going from completely ambulatory to completely paralyzed. I did have reciprocating gait braces that I would stand with at home and use to kind of walk around the house
hmm
with the walker. Very energy consuming. Also, my balance wasn't great, and so I pretty much was had to have someone not contact guard assist, not touching me necessarily, but
hmm
very close by in case I started to lose my balance. Um, but I do remember for many, many years um, avoiding taking pictures in the chair,
hmm
transferring out to another chair, transferring out to a couch or whatever to not be photographed in the chair. I mean, that was a way of not 100% accepting it. You know what I'm saying? Or not, there was no
yeah
yeah, I was embarrassed. I would prefer not to. It was a very gradual uh, journey to complete acceptance where you're like, you know what, I'm beautiful in or out of the chair, and that doesn't define, who I am.
Yeah.
But I think it is different. I mean, you know, because you can ambulate some, um, but even with the crutches and the long strand crutches, I don't know how
Yeah.
to say that. In braces, I meant, and
Braces.
crutches. Um, then, I'm sure. I guess that kind of like, I don't know. There probably aren't very many people that thought that you were like doing that for attention, right? I mean, braces and
No,
crutches. Yeah.
no, not at all. And so, I use hand controls as well. So, and I keep my wheelchair in the back of my car, but and I have a handicap placard. So, I don't really think about any of the things anymore, and I guess I just feel comfortable in
Mm-hmm.
my city to just like live my life. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So we were kind of talking about the takeaway from all of this, and what a great message that you had, for, because I think the sooner we have these conversations with people and the earlier in their life, and the more, um, this is just like part of the norm,
Hmm.
um, then, you know, I don't know, the better citizens we turn out, right? I mean,
Yes.
yeah. So I mean, like even my children, um, who were born after I was paralyzed, they only know me in a wheelchair, and um, I think as grown-ups now, like they just don't look at people that use a chair or use crutches as very different, right? And
Hmm.
it's not, so they don't avoid people simply because of their disability. Whereas I think some grown-ups do, only because they don't know how to handle it. But you've introduced this at junior high and high school, right? So those people will go into life knowing, you know what, like I know a really cool guy named Travis, it's like not a big deal. It's just how they get around. So kind of, if you want to talk about that.
So, yes, you bring up a really, really good point. And I don't necessarily look at it in the same way, but I do. It's similar. So, before the pandemic, I would give talks to schools, primarily private schools. Again, reason why I talk about private schools so much is because, unlike the public schools, private schools don't have the funding normally or the capacity to have students with disabilities.
Yeah.
Unlike the public schools where you have a lot of, well, I don't want to say a lot, but you have more support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would talk to elementary private schools, and one of the things I would ask them was like, why do you think it's important for somebody like me to talk to you about disabilities? And I'd get all sorts of really good responses. Not the one that I was looking for, but but I think they would say, well, so we know how to talk to somebody, or we can talk to them and we won't offend them. Or I
Oh
said,
yeah.
yeah, those are all really great, but I said, really, the important thing is that some days some of you are going to grow up to be like CEOs and presidents and people in power to make change. So it's like, I've been using this example for a while now for the documentary Crip Camp. Have you
Mm-hmm.
seen that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, I don't know if it's like the perfect example, but if you've seen it, anybody that's listening, that Judy did a lot of great things for the disability community,
Yeah.
and there's no but in what I'm about to say. What I think a lot of people maybe don't realize is that, yes, Judy did all these great things. She galvanized a group of peers to help her who had disabilities. She also needed an able-bodied political person to make
Mm-hmm.
the rest of that happen, unfortunately. So we're not at the point where people with disabilities can just say this is what we want and
Yeah,
we
we
wanted
still
to make it
are. Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
We still need able-bodied individuals, and I don't like using that term
Yeah,
just
no,
because, but
yeah.
so by telling and sharing my stories with, kids that may not have that opportunity ever just because in the school that they're at,
Yeah.
then yes, they can say, "Oh, I know a really great guy named Travis," but they can also be like, "Hey, I met this guy, Travis, but then I also learned more about disability rights, and now I'm in the process of being like an HR manager, and I want to hire somebody with a disability." So that all goes
Wow.
back to the conversation. So I do. It's not about me. It's about, how can we continue to make these changes, and right at the moment, because we're not there yet, some
Mhm.
of that change will have to come from non-disabled people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and part of that is just like it's a numbers game too. I mean, we are a little small minority of people, and we need large numbers and loud voices, yeah, to continue to expand the inclusion of people with disabilities in all areas, and to actually continue to um we still, although we're supposed to have equal rights, we don't. There are anyway, just even in coverage of equipment and things like standing devices where they say they're not medically necessary. That's discrimination. That's this should be a human right. Some of these,
Mhm.
and so yeah, you're right. We have a long way to go, but that's a beautiful way to look at it, right? These people are gonna grow up to be working in all walks of life, and if you introduce these concepts early, you create some allies for the disability community that can help us like continue the fight. So wow, that's beautiful, Travis. I knew I loved you from LinkedIn all the way back then. Um, I thank you so much for being a guest today, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate between
Yes.
our both of our podcasts. And I I'm sure we could speak on a number of topics, and I look forward to the next time we get to hang out too.
Yeah.
I'll have to plan that a little bit better so I'm not in a booth the whole time. But
Definitely.
yeah. All right. Well, have a beautiful day. Thank you so much. And I will include a link to his TEDx talk in the show notes that I will put, that will be on all the podcast platforms. And I will also include it on the YouTube channel as well. So, all right, guys, have a great day, and we will do this again soon.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.